This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 562 with guest Gavin Campbell, recorded on February 9th, 2023. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. I cannot wait for summer to get here. I never say that, but I'm ready for the winter to be over. And of course, we'll post a show with some world-class show notes at theaverageguy.tv. This episode's affiliate sponsor, don't forget Nespresso. Use the code MQU, capital MQU 328. Get $40 off any machine purchase of Nespresso. And if your coffee's terrible, it doesn't have to be. Like, you don't have to have terrible coffee. Sarah bought me an espresso a couple years ago, and it's one of the things that saves me with the pod. Put it in, get some good coffee. You can have it too. Code MQU328. Just write that down, MQU328. $40 off your first machine, and you too can be rocking some super. I don't want you drinking bad coffee. Okay, don't do it. It's bad for you. $40 off your first machine, and I think it's Aaron Lawrence approved. Check it out at nespresso.com. Do that today. Big thanks to Marv B, who joined us last week, and if you haven't listened to that show, caught up to it, kind of your traditional Home Gadget Geeks in a lot of way. Marv, thanks for coming on. If you haven't caught 561, go out and listen to it now. And then big thanks to our Patreon subscribers who are finding value. If you're finding value in this podcast, you can support it via Patreon. Head out to theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. John Biggs sent some beer. We did in the pre-show. By the way, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you automatically get the pre-show. But in the pre-show, John sent me some Perpetual Darkness. Kind of reminds me of my own soul at times. Barley wine ale. 9.5%. John, thanks for, you know how to send beer, so I appreciate you doing that as well. Gavin Campbell's with us. Gavin, always great to see you. Thanks for saying yes. You had a busy day. You're squeezing me in somehow. Thanks for I think you're peeking in on a tech call at the same time. Thanks for coming out.
No problem. Thanks for asking me again. I saw the message pop up because it was funny because I was thinking, maybe I should reach out. It's probably time that I come back on again, give you an update. There's been some significant changes in my house, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. It's always good to have you. I appreciate you saying yes. Going back to an episode, we had Dave McCabe on the program, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, I think. And, he talked about getting into woodworking. And this week over at warpedboards.com, Dave has launched, so just like it sounds, warpedboards.com. I'll have that in the show notes so you can go out there and take a look at that. He's taken everything he talked about on that show and made some products. He's got a bottle opener, and he's got some cutting boards. He's got some flight boards that are available out there, and he's got a whiskey smoker that I picked up from him right off the store. $25, all CNC'd. You can see I already used it in there. We tested it out last night. I made a video for Dave. Little screen on the inside. You add a little bit of He actually even sent me a bag full of shavings to put in there. Throw the shavings in, put it on top of your cocktail. Take your torch, hold it for about 5 seconds, and it drops smoke into the drink. If you haven't tried that before with whiskey, I'm not sure I'd do it with the beer, just to be honest. That would be I don't know if I'd go with that. But on the whiskey end of things, really delicious. Made 2 old fashions with it last night. One for me, one for Sammy. We tried it out, a little bit video. If you haven't checked out his site, warpedboards.com, I know he'd appreciate it. And, long time. Dave's been a long time guy in the community doing woodworking stuff now. Check it out, warpedboards.com. Gavin, what do you think? We spent a little time talking about this in the pre-show, pre-show, you and me.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think? That's pretty cool. Huh?
It's pretty cool, and you educated me on what it was actually for, because this is the first time I've actually seen something like this where you smoke your whiskey.
Yeah,
and I thought that was really cool.
It's a good party trick because it looks cool. Like, you put this thing on top of the glass, and then you light it, and it flames up the top, and the smoke comes out the bottom, and then it kind of swirls around in there. You can leave that on there for 30 seconds, a minute, whatever you want. when you pull it off, the smoke stays in there. It's just a good, like, just a really good party trick, right? One of those kinds of things. So kind of fun. Did add some good flavors to it. And Brian says you may have to pick one of those up. It's pretty cool. And of course, Sports Dave. So if you're so inclined, warpedboards.com. Gavin, of course, you're from Home Tech, or your podcast, hometech.fm. And I
Yes.
went over there and peeked at what you guys are doing. You had a story about a school on the East Coast whose home assistant failed. Not really.
No,
Not
they're
really.
not.
Not really. It wasn't really home assistant, right? But they installed some lights that were kind of green, and then the software that broke down, and they couldn't. Just give me the Reader's Digest condensed version of that. Was pretty cool.
Oh, I guess. Well, the school put in some automation with their lights, and they have it was all software based, and I guess the system that controlled it all kind of went down, so they haven't been able to turn off their lights for over a year. It just sits on. I think they're LED lights, so they're saving money that way. It could have been worse, but at some point I would have just gone and flipped breakers. But
yeah, well, yeah. Why? That's what I was thinking too. Why not just start hitting breakers? Teachers were complaining because they couldn't turn down the lighting. I mean, we're going to talk about home automation tonight, and this is all real stuff, right? When you start thinking, if your hub goes down, or the power goes off, or whatever, right? You kind of get stuck in this situation. It does sound like they got the right part and maybe the right contractor, and they're like, okay, this time there needs to be an override put in so we can override all these systems, right? But certainly the city is paying that power bill for those lights to be on 24/7. And you're right, they are, they're energy efficient lights, so it's not like they're burning incandescents the whole way out. But that's a real concern with home automation, right? When we're thinking about setting this up, you were a Habitat guy for a lot of years, right? And I think the value of the Habitat was that it would work if the internet went down. You've recently made a change and are now using Home Assistant. We've talked about that here. Uyghur's he got me on it. I'm on it here. Why the switch? Why go from that? I mean, you were writing applications for it and all that other stuff. Why the switch?
It was mainly, at first it started out as curiosity. I've heard everybody talk about Home Assistant, how great it was, the things it did, and I got a little curious. So I loaded up Home Assistant on my system, and one of the listeners of the Home Tech show, he kind of gave me that extra push. He was going to send me the Home Assistant Yellow at some point, but we couldn't get a Raspberry Pi,
which is hardware, right? I mean,
which is their hardware. Yep. Yeah. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I don't need their hardware. I'll just run it in a VM on my Unraid server, which I did. And then it kind of just took off from there. Like, as soon as you start getting into it, you're like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. And went from there.
Yeah, just from a basic user experience, this is what snagged me on it. Like the dashboard setup is everything I've ever wanted in home automation dashboarding. Like Habitats was always, it was kind of there, but it was not really what I wanted. Even trying to use some of the Amazon or some of the whatever hubs, that come in don't really work as well. Man, the web browser, the dashboards, the way they allow you to create those with radial buttons and on and off switches, that's what pulled me in. Was that a similar experience for you?
Yeah, they seemed a lot more polished to me. Everything from their app to their interface to their dashboards were more polished. When I was on Habitat, I was using a lot more other services. So for their dashboard, I was using Sharp Tools, which is a web-based, alternative, and I found I had to augment it with other tools, where with Home Assistant, everything was just integrated.
Mm-hmm. Did you find Home Assistant had more integrations than Habitat did with the equipment? Now, it's not like you have every single home automation device that's there, but for you, were the integrations easier?
I found it had everything I tried to think of. Somebody either did it at some point, and it's not even that it had more integrations, but like it had more powerful integrations, right? And I'm sure we'll get into that, but like with their cameras, the video feeds from the cameras and how that's all integrated was so much easier and built into Home Assistant that I really liked. And that's one of the things that really impressed me.
Yeah. You wrote a lot of integrations for Habitat, right? I mean, every time we talked, it seems like, oh yeah, I just gonna write some, just
Yeah,
write a thing for
I
it.
did it for myself mainly though.
Yeah, no, right on, right on. I
Yeah.
mean, you needed it, right? Did you find as you were making the migration, you were having to write as many or some of the same? Maybe the device you had was a little obscure, and so on both platforms you had to write for it, or did you find in the Habitat that most of that stuff was covered?
In Home Assistant, I didn't have to. I wrote one integration. And
One, okay,
it
yeah.
was just for my Foscam cameras, and mainly because their integration of Foscam was so basic, and I needed a few extra features. So I only wrote one, but everything else was already there, and I didn't have to really write anything else. I had
What
everything I wanted.
everything. Whoa, that's a
Yeah,
you got a
yeah,
lot, dude.
yeah,
You got
everything.
a lot of stuff going on. What about what is it? Z-Wave, Zigbee, some of
Yep.
those. Is that all work for you?
Yeah. So this is one of the things I also like about Home Assistant is you can change out the hardware as you want. So
Mhm.
you can choose the Z-Wave stick you want and put that in, and you have full control over that. If you like Z-Wave 700 or Z-Wave 500, or you want to put in a Z-Wave 800 stick, you can put that in and swap it out how you want. Same with the Zigbee, and you just add it to the system. It discovers it for the most part, and if it's too new of a device, it'll eventually get added, right? Like it that's what I really liked because I've played with different sticks in there, right, to see which one gave me the better results, and it was surprising what I found.
Building automations, but as we compare Habitat to Home Assistant, building the automations. How did you find the difference between those two platforms on getting automations to work? Pretty close?
Pretty close. The Habitat rule machine is actually very powerful,
Mhm.
right? So I found that one probably is more powerful in some aspects. But I was able, all my automations, I was able to do in Home Assistant. And in if you want something more powerful in Home Assistant or something more visual, you can even like install Node Red. I don't know if you're familiar with that,
Yep,
but it's
yep,
almost like a
yeah,
graphic. You draw out your
right,
automations type of thing.
right.
You can install that, and that's integrated in as well. So it gives you that extra power, extra flexibility.
I think Uyghur did that for one weekend and then shut it down. He got all excited about it, did the whole thing, and then shut the whole thing down. Do you still have both running in your environment?
Um, no, I actually have shut down the Habitat now.
Mm.
It's a hub sitting on top. I feel bad every time I walk by it. Like it felt like it was watching me every time I migrated something else
Judging
over.
you? Was it
Yeah,
judging you?
judging me.
Why aren't you
Right.
using me?
Yeah. And I one day I have to boot it back up and back up all my code I've written on that because who knows if
Yeah,
one day I'll need it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's the I like the hardware implementation of Habitat. Like, it's clean, it's small, it does it's built exactly for what it does.
Yes.
You know, you're not trying to take an old piece of equipment and make it work. The Pi implementation of Home Assistant, I always got that kind of feeling like, I mean, yeah, you can. And you've got an Unraid. I'm running it in a I think I'm running it in VirtualBox on Windows
Yes.
on the in a well, or maybe I was, I think because I had a hard time getting for VM, no, what do they call it? Hyper-V, there we go. On Windows, I had a hard time getting the Hyper-V working. I did, and so I think I've moved that to Hyper-V, for it, which is not particularly difficult. I mean, I struggled with a little bit. That's not my forte. I did get it working, but I always felt like Habitat had some great hardware, and they continue. I think they continue to upgrade it and you know, make better units. So I like that. I like that purpose of it. But you found in the end just the user experience is what you preferred with Home Assistant rather than with Habitat.
Yeah, the interface mainly. Like
Yeah.
you said, you love their dashboards. I love their dashboards. Everything works fast. And
Yeah.
it took me a while, to find the right mix of hardware. But when I did, it's working beautifully now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I like it as well. Tell me what else. What other things did you like about it? What were some other things in there?
Well, one of the main things that really got me was the camera integration. So I have all my cameras. I have about 10 cameras around the place, and they all go into a Blue Iris box. Well, there's a Blue Iris integration, so it brought all the cameras right into Home Assistant. Now, what I wanted to really do, and on Habitat, I was almost getting there, but it was just difficult. But I wanted notifications with the image on it, easily done in Home Assistant. Then I was like, well, I can get notifications with the video feed on it. So now I get notifications and I press on it, and it actually brings up the video feed right away in a notification box. So I can see exactly what's happening at that point. I was like, that's really cool. Well, even upping that, I get notifications with the video feed on my watch. Right. So when I tap on it on my watch, I'm watching the live video feed on my watch. Right. So I thought that was really cool. And then you can even add actions to those notifications. So I have actions where I can make it open it in the Blue Iris app, or open it in Home Assistant app, or snooze the notifications for 6 hours, and it will just snooze my cameras. There are notifications for how many hours I want. So I thought that was really cool. And that was one of the main things that really got me saying, hey, that is cool. And on top of that, Home Assistant handles all the traffic. So all the traffic coming from the cameras to the app on your phone is going through Home Assistant's cloud and everything like that. It does not, you don't have to open a port on your home router and expose your Blue Iris to the internet, right? It all goes through, they handle it. And I was like, that was really nice.
Wow. Yeah, no, it sounds good. It Ring, not so good, just to be honest. I have 4 Ring cams. It doesn't work very well. And I don't know why, but it just doesn't. Do you have any Ring?
I used to have Ring. But like you said, when it came to integrations, I didn't like the Ring.
No,
like,
they're terrible.
No,
Yeah,
I do things like when people walk up my driveway, it pops up on my TVs, or they ring the doorbell, it pops up on my TV, stuff. Or I could press a button on my Harmony remote and shows cameras outside or inside. I couldn't do any of that with the Ring, right?
Yeah, in the with the A lady, you can say, "Hey, show me the insert cam name here." And it flips over and goes to the web and then brings the cam. By the time you get there, your kids are graduated from college, and you're like, hey, so that doesn't work very well. The Home Assistant app doesn't. It brings the last image up, and it doesn't have a lot of options for it. I kind of keep hoping. One of the things I've noticed about Home Assistant is the development of it is constant. Like every month I get a new update. Every month I get a new core update to it, right? You have the kind of I think the core, and then something else. There's 2 updates in there.
Yes. Yeah. Right? And that's one of the things being a Home Assistant user is get used to updates, because they come like this week. I think there were 2 or 3 alone, and it was just core updates, the point updates. Every month they release the big update and they have release parties, they have announcements, and then they release point updates, just bumping up libraries or fixing little bugs. But at least it's getting up to date, and I like keeping it up to date because it makes it easier to keep updating it instead of doing one big update where it could break things over time. Right. So I always update my Home Assistant.
Yeah, and it's easy on the dashboard. It's easy to see. Then the notifications, just a button, just click on it and say update. Doesn't take long to get it done.
And that's because you're running it in a VM too, right? So when you're in a VM, it's so much easier to update because the Home Assistant OS handles all that for you. You just click update and you just wait, and then it's done. If you're running it in Dockers and stuff like that, it gets a little more difficult with the updates.
Yeah, and I think I've got it on a pretty pretty powerful box. And that's been such a better, I've always tried to run these on the budget boxes. Like, oh yeah, we'll throw it on that PC that's 1,000 years old over in the corner. And it needs a little bit more. I mean, they say like, oh yeah, you can run this on a Raspberry Pi. The best experience for me is on a modern computer with, some modern hardware. It just works better. Just kind of works better that way. So yeah, I can't recommend the Ring integration with it. Just doesn't work very well. I use it works great for all the lighting. It works great. I get the battery power. I do get the battery power of all the Ring cams, which is kind of nice. That part works out really well. I get my printer ink, like, there's an integration with HP. So I get the printer ink percentages. What else did you like about it?
The UI, we touched on that. And we also touched on the hardware, swapping it all out. Like you, I run it in a VM on my Unraid box, and I dedicated probably like maybe 4 of the cores to it. That may be overkill, but I really felt the difference in the speed.
Yeah, for
Right?
sure. Yeah,
When I
for
open
sure.
a door, it's instant, like lights
Yeah.
turn on, everything. And then what I also like is that, like I said, everything you think of, someone's done before. So it's really been really great like that. Like I don't have to really recreate things. People
Mhm.
have already done it for you, and you just add the integration, or you can find in their forums how to do it, what YAML to edit, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. Right?
Yeah.
Um, so those are some of the key things. One of the cool things I found, I never expected to do this when I first got into it, but I was able to read my water meter. So apparently my water meter sends out a signal, and I had an SDR antenna. Once I put that in there was an integration that pulled it in, and all of a sudden it was reading my water meter
Really?
data.
Wow.
Yeah, which was,
Wow.
I found really cool, because now I can see like how much water I'm using when I water the grass, or
Yeah.
like I can get an idea of what my bill is before it even comes in. And even on top of that, it was picking up the water meters of all my neighbors. Which I should have said that when you had a drink, but
That's hilarious, dude.
but I've actually messaged my neighbor and said, "Hey, someone's taking a long shower," because it picked up his meter.
Do you really want to tell them that you can creep on their
we're
water?
we're close like that.
Okay, good. All
We're
right.
pretty close, but it was surprising to see that everyone's water meter was just shooting out a signal, and anybody can read it.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm trying to
Huh.
get my gas in there as well now.
Huh. That's kind of scary. Okay, so is that the meter? Like I have a wire that runs up from my water to a unit on the outside of the house that in theory the water company drives by or something and is that what they're
It's
doing? Is that
similar thing. They
okay.
just recently switched us over. We used to have to call in every month and give them a number, and then they put some smart meters in, and that's when I found out, hey, this meter is actually
Ah.
broadcasting the signal.
That's that's creepy. I mean, it's water. It's not like it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like it's anything like that. What are you using? So from an interface perspective, what are you looking at? I mean, I know they have an app for the phone,
Yes.
but what do you have it up on your desk? What do you use? Just a web? You just use a web page to view it, or what are you using?
Well, most of our interaction through it is through the A lady, right?
Okay.
So anything
Oh,
we have some things automated, but a lot of the interaction for pretty much anything is through the A lady, where we can tell her to turn on the fireplace, or turn on the TVs, or the backyard lights, or anything like that, right? But then the app we'll use on our phones. So that if we need to open up the app, because you always will at some point, we can do it on the app. And I just create simple dashboards on the app, and some of it is status of things. So I have status of if any devices went offline, or any low battery devices, being proactive. So when I open up the app, I can see stuff like that. We can control the garage doors, or anything like that from A lady, and A lady is our main one, but we can also do it from Siri or Google Home. I also have
mhm.
those in here that I play a lot with, right? So it's all the devices are on all those voice assistants.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a Surface Pro 3, an old Surface Pro 3 that's touch.
Yeah,
And that dashboard on that, and it's just because I couldn't really use this computer for anything else at this point. I mean, it's really slow.
yeah,
But for running the Home Assistant dashboard, it looks great. So I just use the web browser internally. It sits at my desk. It's in a dock. I mean, that battery is a long shot at this
yeah,
point.
yeah.
It's not. If I take it off, it dies, right? But that's worked out well for me too. And you just kind of reminded me, like I had initially had to set up on my phone, and then I think I stopped using it, and the app went away. Probably need to reinstall that because that could be super handy, right? To have that app available to me as another way of interacting with it, right?
It is cool. Like I've added some. It's pretty cool what you can do with it. I've added some like extra things into the app. So it's loaded on the wife's phone, and when she's in it, if she's not home, or if she's at home, or wherever she is, it will tell her the length of how long it is for her drive to work, how long her drive to work will take, or it will tell her how long the drive will take to get back home, right? And it pulls that information from Wise because they have a Wise integration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I've customized the dashboard based on who's logged into it on the time. And she kind of likes that too, because she could just load it and see, oh, today there must be an accident. It's taking longer than usual to get to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And things like that. Like you can look at it and she sees status if any of the doors are open. I think the most used automation though is the good night routine. Right. And I think the one time I had it was not with Home Assistant, but when it was down once and she had to actually go around and turn off everything and close everything and lock everything, she actually said, you better get that thing up and running again.
Yeah,
she's like, one time, that's it. I did it once. You better get it up and running again.
Yeah, we haven't implemented that here. A one word to control them all. To kind of shut everything down. With that hasn't worked for us, but we do have a lot of integrations for the rooms.
Yeah.
So when I get done here, there's either keywords that I say, or I can go right to the dashboard and just go, and they all go off. Right. We've got some timing set up for lights where we want to leave them on at a certain brightness in certain areas for a certain length of time. Yep. Yes, we still have our Christmas tree up, which is still controlled by a switch. I don't know what we just both look at each other like, you want to take it down? No, I don't want to take it down. Week. No, I think it's going to stay up. I seriously think it's going to stay up all year. But it'll be June.
The A lady.
Yes. Yeah. I do.
Oh, so you use the room awareness of it? Like you could just tell her to turn off the lights and she'll know what room you're in and what lights.
No, I haven't set those up yet. No, that's a good idea. We do have one in every room. Here's the problem. On the first floor, they're so close together, they hear each other. So that may run. No, that hasn't worked for us. I know for a lot of folks it works great. And it's not like I'm upset that it doesn't. It just doesn't fit our family flow. But for me, it's really nice. Click off so I have my monitors, my studio monitors are set on one plug. My work monitors are set on another. And so when I'm done with things, I can hit the laptop button so the laptop goes to sleep.
Yeah.
Tell the A lady to turn off the work monitors, or hit the buttons, work, studio, hit the Surface so that goes into sleep mode. And everything down here is out. Like, I mean, I have a lot. It's 10 monitors down here. And I can shut those things off in like 3 seconds. Right. And so that's a super nice, and I can do it with my voice, or I can do it with I can hit them, on the dashboard if I want to do it that way. If I forget if there's another A lady around the corner, I can just say, oh yeah, turn off that light, right, on the way up. So that's kind of the way we use them. Anything else that you found that you really like? You've got some things you don't like. It sounds like we're being fanboys. You've got a few things you don't like, but anything else and you want to highlight before we move to that list?
Just the reliability has been great. Now that I got it all up and running, it has been super reliable for me. And it's almost like I don't even want to touch it anymore. Like it does its thing. It does it fast. And I've never had any issues of it like slowing down or anything like that. At first, it was a few growing pains. I admit they had one update that actually had a memory leak, and I was testing that over the weekend. That was a bit of a problem, but it's just other than that, it's been super reliable, and I'm really liking it.
Cool. Couple questions coming in on the chat room about this the water meter thing. So let's Jim Shoemaker says, yeah, read your own water meter, detect leaks. I mean, that could be right.
Yep.
A usage of it, right? If you're you're not using water and yet you see it being used, right? Could be a leak when no one's home. Brian says the ability to read your neighbor's meters, is that something that they can patch, or will water companies have to install new hardware to stop that? Before you answer that, answer this one too along with it. Joe says that's actually really cool. I missed what you were using to read those signals. So what are you using, and do you think, it's kind of part of the service, right? Talk a little bit about that.
So it was an antenna off of Amazon, right? If I look at my orders, I'd have to pull it up. But it was...
Don't judge a person by his Amazon orders.
Yeah, but I can't find it right now, but I think it's called SDR.
An SDR antenna. We'll
Yes, if
track
I
that down and throw it in the show notes for the produced show.
yes, but it
But
was just it plugged into the USB and it had a little antenna on a cable that I put on the side of my rack. It had a magnetic, mount to it, and it just sat there and it picked up my water meter. And yeah, it looks like all of our water meters in the area are just broadcasting this signal,
on that frequency, right?
yeah, on the
Yeah.
same frequency.
Listen, the
And
water company's not anticipating somebody coming along and hacking, like getting one of these antennas. Like until you mentioned this, I never would have thought that this was even out there. But the whole intent, right? They broadcast the water meter signal so that they can drive up the street and collect your information. That's kind of why they drive around. That signal is letting off your usage plus your address, I think is what it does, right? And so they drive around and collect this data. You'd think there'd be better ways to do that in 2023, but that's what they do. That's the way they're doing it right now. It's a utility. So I don't know, like Brian, to your point, I don't think they would want to patch this. This would make their reading unavailable, right?
it would make it it would just make it more difficult for them, because even the gas company, I see the guy come up and he just seems to wave something and pick up the gas
Yeah.
meter and then he's on to
Yeah.
the next house. And the electrical company, I don't know, I don't ever see a guy ever walk up to that one, but they must have something too. I've been trying to see if I can get those signals as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, hold on. It took me a second to realize what you said. It's like, oh yeah, you could tap into that. Well, you'd think in 2023 the utilities would come together and have a unified way of collecting that it would send that data in. And I bet they do in some cases, rather than have them drive around and collect that data. Couldn't they? I mean, we have some things now. They should just be able to,
I know.
you know,
I
don't you think? Let's see. Alex says you can't remotely disconnect it or anything. Well, yeah, I mean, you could disconnect it, but the power or the water company, that's how they're billing you, right? So
Yeah.
this, if you disconnect it, you're probably going to get. And Alex does say the only thing it's probably just broadcasting usage, and
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose of it, right?
All it
Um,
broadcasts, I think, is just the number of the meter and then the current value
yeah,
of it.
that yes, because the number that's probably a unique identifier to you,
Yes.
and then the whatever the value that they're trying to pull off of that. Yeah. Well, that caused a little more ruckus than I thought. That's a good.
Reading your neighbor's water meter causes some excitement, I guess.
Well, it's funny because, like, when you said you read your own water meter, yeah, I was like, oh yeah. But then when you mentioned the neighbors, like, oh, that's a whole different, like, that's like stealing your neighbor's Wi-Fi,
Yes.
from it. No, I've had those thoughts out in the shed, and I've got a Wi-Fi extender in the kitchen that covers the deck, but it doesn't quite make it all the way to the shed. But I am really close to my neighbor's house, and they have an open. And I was like, I had to no, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to show up on there. I don't want to be the guy because I've named everything. He would know. He would know. No, don't want to be that guy. Okay, what in this transition, what kind of things do you not like about it? We've been very positive so far.
Yes.
What have
Yes.
been some of the negatives?
Well, first off, everybody I think gets intimidated when they first run it. It's a big learning curve. There's a lot to it. Understanding just the terminology or where things are, entities versus devices versus integrations versus add-ons. It gets intimidating. When I first loaded it, I was just presented with hundreds and hundreds of entities, and entities are almost like properties of a device in a way, right? And you were just like, this is a lot of information. So, I started hiding them. I hide a lot of the entities, disable or hide ones I don't need just to get them out of the way so it's not as intimidating. So that was the first thought. There's still Home Assistant is in the process of migrating everything to the GUI, to the user interface, right? But there's still a lot of things that you still need to drop down to YAML to edit. But over time, they'll migrate more and more of that out of the YAML. But when you get to know YAML, it took me a little bit to get used to it. You could do so much in that YAML, but it's a steep learning curve. But you could do things faster. Like when I was designing my dashboards, for example, there are times when you had to add 10 different buttons and all the clicking, you could be there forever. Well, I would just drop down to YAML, copy and paste code, paste it 10 times, and just change the entity name, and then I was done. Dashboard's all done. Or I just copy the whole dashboard YAML over to another page and just edit what I want, right? So as powerful as it is, it's still like YAML is still like a scary thing that you have to get your hands on.
Well, it's a living. They're working through a whole. I mean, they're working through a whole dynamic change that's going on with home automation. Right?
Yes,
and they're changing things all the time. Habitat was the same way in some regards, right? Because all these standards are changing. So there is a lot going. There is a lot going on with that. Do you think? I mean, there's a lot of home automation companies coming and going too, where they're there for a while and then they're gone. Does that play into any negatives on Home Assistant at all?
no, Home Assistant's been here for a while. I mean, last time I tried it was years ago, and I didn't like it back then because it wasn't as user friendly as it is today. But it's been here for a while. It's open sourced, so there's a lot of people contributing to the code that want to keep it running.
Yeah.
I don't see it disappearing anytime soon.
Okay.
I think they're making some big strides this year. This year they say is the year of the voice. They started working on integrating their own voice assistant.
Oh,
right. So they've partnered with, or they've actually, I don't know if he acquired or he's now an employee of theirs, and he made the Raspy project, which was like a hardware based home voice assistant.
Open source, right?
It's open source. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, they're working to integrate that, and they just recently showed off like the first piece of that integration, where they're working on, you can interact with your home through a text, through like if you, instead of voice right now, through text. So I can type in turn on this light, and it will translate that into the command and take it from there. And then the next steps, they will start working on translating the voice into the text, and then that text gets translated into the command, right? So it's kind of cool to see how they're working through this, but they're moving very fast with it, and it's looking very exciting. And they're talking about integrating it with Chat GPT, right? So that's the big craze right now. So,
isn't everybody?
Yeah, everybody is, but that will take it to the next level, because anything that it can't handle from an automation point of view, it passes off to Chat GPT, and that's where you'll get all the other commands or all the other information from. So I'm looking forward to see what they do with that.
Yeah, Chat GPT could even offer to write the code and then implement it.
Yes. Yep. I've done that on Chat GPT. I asked it to write me some code for Home Assistant. It actually spit out something that was usable. I had to tweak it a bit, but it did like 90% of the work for me. I was like, awesome.
Gets it formatted for you, gets you enough to kind of then like, okay, let's make this a little bit more, kind of make it a little bit more efficient. Just tonight before the show, I was taking my wife out for dinner, and we were talking. We were in the car, and I've got this Legacy. It's got this giant screen on the front, right? And I said, what I really wish this had was a weather app in it. She goes, "You mean it doesn't have a weather app?" And I said, "No." I showed her the apps, and then so she says to me, "What would be really cool is if I could just say, 'Hey Subaru,' we both own Subarus. 'Hey Subaru, set the temperature to 80 degrees,' or 'Hey Subaru, turn on the fan, 2 more notches,' or whatever like that." And it kind of got me thinking, like, yeah, why don't we have voice assistant in these cars for those kinds of controls? I know you don't want that to be the only way to do it, right?
Yes,
for a lot of people, but boy, that could certainly be handy. Alex does remind us, going back to the meter conversation, he says they also check manually for odd readings. So like, and some municipalities, some companies, these things do come in automatically. They just come out, they leave that check for that on odd occasions, right? They also send them in remotely as well. This is what he's saying, as well. My company does installations for programs that does just that. He does say weather stations and tire pressure sensors with SDR as well. So, and this is a little.
Just to touch on that, but my next project in spring, I was actually going to look for some soil moisture sensors that I would be able to pick up with the SDR as well, because those would be great to know where I have to water more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, right on. Oh, I'm gonna have to follow you on this one because this would be. I'm always like, why I can't have how many water sensors would you want in your yard to know? Like, if you just think about it, your geography of your yard, how many sensors would it take you for you to feel like you had most of it covered? What do you think?
For me, I would probably put it in. I'd only get a couple and put them in the areas where I think I'm underwatering. There's certain areas they look like they're getting a lot of water and they're great,
Right.
but there's certain
Yeah.
areas where no matter how much water I run, it seems like I'm still underwatering. I have this one big
Mhm.
tree, and I think it sucks it all up from the grass. So I'd
Yeah.
probably just get a
Yeah.
couple and I'd
Yeah.
stick it in those spots just so I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So throw a number out. What do you think? What do you think if you were going to go buy some sensors, put them in the
I'd be
ground?
probably 3 or 4.
Oh, okay. Wow, that few. I was thinking more like 10 or 12
I'll
is
start
what I
at
was
3 or 4
thinking.
and end up at 40, but
Yeah, well, you buy a half dozen, and then by the time you get them in and you can't find them anymore. So then you got to buy another brand, right? Because that brand
yes,
went out of business, right?
yeah,
Those kinds of things. Yeah, I'd put a couple out front, and then maybe 3 in the front yard, and maybe as many as 5 or 7 in the backyard. There's just because it slopes down. I
yes.
don't. I'm in the same situation. I don't know, and I'd love to be more efficient with my watering, right, on that. Now, some would say, well, okay, duh, Jim, if the grass is green, it's fine. If it's brown, you need to water it more, right? I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that
I
works
wanna
too.
water it before it gets to the brown. I wanna know,
Yeah, you know, right, right,
and
right.
sometimes, like, no matter how much water there's certain sections of my lawn, no matter how much water I put, I think I'm running it long, it still starts to turn brown, and then I realize that tree is sucking up all the water. There's another section where apparently I have a cinch bug issue I have to take care of next year,
Mm,
so but it would
mhm.
be nice. My backyard lawn just grows like crazy. That one's green, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I'm trying to do less lawn, just to be honest. So I don't.
me too.
I'm replacing the lawn with other things, just like other things that maybe don't require so much water. Hey, this antenna, where do you actually have it? This since it's getting so much traction on the podcast tonight, where do you actually have it located? Does it need to be outside or is it inside? Where do you put your tap?
Well, for now, I'm only picking up my water meter, so it's pretty much it's part of my rack in the basement, and the water
Okay.
meter's down there anyway, so I don't have to worry about it. Who knows when I go with the lawn moisture sensors if I may
Yeah.
need to relocate it. But in terms of my other antennas, I have the Zigbee and the Z-Wave antenna, and what I did with those is I got some extra long active USB cables. And I ran those USB cables all the way from my rack to like the center of the basement roof. I have an open basement.
Okay.
And so now it's centralized in the house. And that made it so much better for the signal all around my house for
Really?
all the devices to get
Okay.
to it. So it's away from all the electronics because my rack's in the front corner of the house. So now I put it the antennas sit in the middle of the house. And then I have one super long cable because every now and then when you're trying to add a Z Wave or a Zigbee device, it just doesn't want to pick it up, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a super long cable where I could plug the Z Wave antenna in and a dongle in and just walk it right up to my master bathroom and put it
Yeah.
right next to the device and add it. And that saves me a lot of frustration. So that's a
Yeah.
pro tip. Have one of those. It really helps.
You mentioned the bathroom. Yes or no? Is it okay to put one of those smart devices in the bathroom? Would you have an assistant in the bathroom as well?
I do. Oh, wow. The assistant.
Yeah.
Actually, I have one in the wife's bathroom, the one she likes
Okay.
to use a lot,
Okay.
and she actually uses a lot. Is it going to rain today?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
traffic
Yeah.
like?
Yeah. Okay.
What's the weather like? So she actually, I hear her using it a lot, and I'm afraid to take it out of there. So it's a
I'm assuming
yes.
it's a puck. It's
It's the puck, and I
okay.
have it on a little mount that sits over the plug, right? So it
Yeah.
sits right
Yeah.
there, and she uses it a lot.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, we use it more and more all the time. You said active USB. Does that mean it's got power associated? You're adding additional power to it, or
Because it's so long, I think USB cables are limited in length. I can't remember if it was
okay.
6 feet in length or 6 meters, but then when you add the active cable, it lets you get up to like one of my cables is 60 feet.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's the one I use to carry all the way upstairs whenever I have to re-add something.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. I'm just kind of thinking through the setup. Couple more comments. Joe says The older Microsoft Sync, this was available in cars way back, did that for Ford, where you could talk to it and it would change things in the car. Not sure about the newer ones. I don't think that exists anymore, Joe. I
My
think that
Acura has some voice assistance built into it, right?
really
But we don't
okay.
use it because the last thing I want to be doing is fumbling with commands when I'm driving. So
Yeah,
I still touch the buttons and know where those are, right?
I would love this the legacy uh temperature controls, HVAC, what would you call it? Yeah. The environmental, there we go. The environmental controls are touchscreen and I hate them. That's the one thing I love everything about that
Yes.
car except they should have made those buttons, not put them on the touch screen. It's a terrible experience. Now if I could say, "Hey Subaru, set the temperature to 80 degrees and turn the fan on 3," that would be awesome. Like
Yeah, if you get an Android Auto, I think you can use the Google Voice probably, and with Apple, what's Apple's version? CarPlay.
CarPlay doesn't let me
Yes.
change environmental controls.
Oh, yes, yes. You want all that
I want the
stuff.
environment.
Yes,
The other
yes.
stuff, it's working great. The podcasting stuff works great. Siri works great in there. Like, I mean, it really works well. That's the one, and I didn't know till tonight that I wanted that. That's just to be really
Well,
clear.
I think Lexus has it if you needed to get a
Ah,
Lexus, you
no,
know?
no, I get no Lexus. I'd buy a Tesla before I bought a Lexus. Um, Jim Shoemaker says, if the signal can be interrupted or spoofed, it could reduce your water bill. Yeah, but eventually someone will come around, and there will be before if you move, there will be a reckoning
Yeah.
of that bill
Or you
at some
forget to
point.
spoof it 1 month and then you get the real value and now you owe
Yeah,
$3,000.
exactly. But Jim, we get your point. We
Yeah.
get your point. Joe says, I bet there's FCC violations in there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I bet, I bet they own that frequency, right? Whatever, and that SDR antenna can see things on that frequency, and I bet the companies are allowed to use that frequency for those kinds of reporting things. It's in a different spectrum. So, well, there's probably a whole show just on that kind of stuff. Me and you guys got pretty excited about that. Anything else? Any other before we think about just recommendations? Any other negatives to this that you saw?
Just be used to changes, right? Like it seems like a system that's constantly changing. So a lot of the YouTube tutorials you may look at could already be
Mm,
outdated, right? And that's
yeah.
what I found. I would look for things and it was already outdated. It was already, changed. So that kind of got a little frustrating. So I kind of had to poke around and learn some of this stuff myself. But I'm a guy that will read the documentation too.
you,
Like,
you're the only guy in the world,
yeah, they
Gavin.
write documentation for me. I'll point out spelling mistakes sometimes, right? They wrote it for me,
Oh, that's
right?
awesome. That's
But
awesome.
because you learn a lot when you read the documentation sometimes. So
Yeah.
get used to that and get used to updates.
Yeah.
Like I said, sometimes 2, 3 a week.
The negative I would have is that I did integrate it with my Apple account so that it would it would display my phone battery.
Yeah.
It would display the battery to my watch. Those are the two things. I don't really need those, to be honest with you. The drawback to it was always pinging my Apple account. And at one point in time, Apple didn't I couldn't find a setting to say that's okay. So every day I
Oh,
was getting emails saying, "Hey, someone's trying to access your Apple account," right? And I don't have a static IP. It's changing all the time with T-Mobile. So I think that change was set in a way where Apple was not recognizing the IP it was coming from. I get a couple emails a day, you could say, well, yeah, I'll just ignore it. But then do you really want to ignore kind of warnings like that on your accounts? I set up all this security in 2FA, so I have that kind of access. So I ended up removing the Apple integration from it completely.
well, once
Um,
you have the app installed, the app now pulls a whole bunch of things from your phone that you can now integrate. So, and
oh,
it's not pinging anywhere. It's just
mm,
the app is
okay.
reporting it back to the Home Assistant, and like the battery life would be one of them, or a
Yep.
GPS location, or are you on Wi-Fi? What Wi-Fi you're on? All sorts of things that you can act on.
All right. Well, after the show, I totally forgot about the app. I mean, I've been doing this, just on my PC, as an interface. I totally forgot about the app. I'll have to do it. Okay, so you might have inspired a few people to like, all right, I know Jim and Mike and Gavin, you've talked about this before. I'm going to try Home Assistant. Like, what would be some recommendations? I know we've mentioned a few, but let's kind of just recap them. What kind of recommendations do you have for us?
I've mentioned this before, run it in a VM. It's probably the best way of running it, right? Not just that, but it's also easy to pass through devices to that VM. And then updating in that VM is so much better,
Totally. Yeah, totally.
I really like it in the VM. I'm glad I did that. Entities, I hide all the whenever I add a device, it may come up with a whole bunch of entities. I will hide any entity I just will not use so that doesn't clutter the interface, right? Like I have
Totally. Yeah.
thousands of entities in my Home Assistant. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous, right? So that's another.
Well,
Come up
like
with
it finds the Bitdefender box
yeah.
and it's got some throughput, it's got some input output, it's got like all these weird requests in it. I mean, that thing's got more stuff coming out of it than I ever anticipated. And when I hooked to it with Home Assistant, it found it by itself. Do you want to add this? Well, not all those entities. Like, I don't really care what some of those are. So I like
Yeah.
that recommendation. Hide those, the ones that you're not using.
I have like 1,200 entities that are hidden. like that's how bad it was. Like it was just driving me nuts. So I cleaned a lot of that up. Come up with a naming convention, a good naming convention, something that will make things easy for you to find a device. I usually just use the room name, the device type, and something a little descriptive. Like I'd be like master bedroom window left, for example. That way when I'm just like adding all the master bedroom devices to a dashboard, I see them all, and I just keep adding them, and it makes it easy, makes it more organized for yourself. When it comes to Zigbee, Z-Wave, there's multiple ways. So Home Assistant's working on, they have their integrated Zigbee add-on, right? Or you can use something called Zigbee to MQTT, which is an add-on to it, right? And same with Z-Wave. Z-Wave has Z-Wave JS UI, right? And it's an add-on, and it goes through an MQTT server to the Home Assistant. Now, those are developed by, I guess, other developers make these, and they're just integrated into Home Assistant tightly. Well, I recommend using those from the beginning, right? And the reason why is because they add extra features that you may not know you need now, but when you do know about them, it's like really cool. One of them is like, for example, Z-Wave. You can use something called Z-Wave associations, right? So you could set up an automation in three-way that says, if I turn on this light, then also turn on that light, and back and forth, etc., etc., right? And there'll be a little delay to that, but it will work for the most part. When you do an association in Z-Wave, it will actually send the command directly to the light, not going through the hub. Okay. Right? It goes directly to the light and back and forth, and that way you get faster speed, or even if the hub's down, my three-way will still work.
Hey, what's the okay? So while I'm thinking about this, what's the difference between grouping? So say like I want to turn a light on. When I say turn this one on, it automatically turns on another one. What's the difference between doing that and just grouping them?
So grouping them, I like to, if I do it in an automation, I like to add them so they all turn on at once. Okay. Right. So I'll add them as a group, and then it sends the same signal. Sometimes I'll send things in parallel if I know it's not going to flood the network. In some of my automations, I'm like, send all these commands in parallel, right? Instead of in order. And that way things like lights will all turn on at the same time. Okay. But it always comes down to how many you're going to do at the same time, right? Because you can flood a network.
But it is your network. I mean, does that really matter? I mean, are there some, in other words, say you were going to turn on every light in your house.
Yes.
And you've got an all home light, turn them all on for an emergency or whatever.
Yeah.
Would that flood your network in a sense? Would it slow it down, do you think?
Yes. If they're all, say, Z-Wave, for example. And I see this in my night routine, because my night routine would go through all my Z-Wave devices, light switches, and turn them all off. And you will see it slowly stutter its way through because it's sending too much at once, right? How you could get around that is you can make it so you send 5 commands, wait a little bit, a couple seconds, send 5 commands, wait a couple seconds, and just let it process it, and it will kind of get around that, so it all depends on the effect you want.
Some of my siblings would say, what do you can't just walk around and turn the switches. Same thing, Jim. Yeah, but I
Well,
don't have to.
and my home automation journey started with an argument out of who was going to turn off the pool pump at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? I always say
Yeah,
that. That's how it
yeah,
started. I was like, you know what? I'm going to
yeah.
automate this so we don't have to go turn this pump off.
Right.
Yeah.
No, right on. What else? Anything
My
else? Yeah.
last one, and this is a shocker, but this is through personal experience when it came to Z-Wave. So I've used a Z-Wave 700 controller. I've used Z-Wave 500 controllers, right? And it's just one's newer than the other. But I've always had problems with the 700 controller. Like it would work, but there would be times when things would slow down or, devices would just stop responding or anything like that, right? And this is where with Home Assistant, I was able to test this. So I had a Z700 controller, and even with the latest firmware and everything, it just didn't feel as responsive. Like it just felt like things, would break down or slow down at sometimes, right? I took that out and I put in a 500 controller I had laying around. Night and day difference. My 500 controller has been running beautifully. No slowdowns, no, issues, no devices dropping off. Everything just works beautifully. And, I always like to recommend if you could get a 500 controller and you're having issues with your 700 controller, try just swap it out, put a Z-Wave 500 controller if you get your hands on one, and see what life is like. Because I've noticed that a number of things, even with Habitat, my Habitat C5 was probably the best Habitat I had, right? Because that was still a 500 in that box. But then when I got the C7, I was constantly babying the Z-Wave network, right? And I just realized it was the antenna because they came out with firmware updates and they said, this should fix that problem, but it never was the same, right? So my C5 I gave to my neighbor across the street and he's loving it, right? Because it works perfectly for him.
Yeah. Could I I don't have a Z-Wave. Z-Wave's built into the Habitat, right?
Yes.
The Z-Wave antenna.
Yeah.
But that's the only Z-Wave antenna I have. If I
Yeah.
was going to Habitat, if I was going to Home Assistant, is there any way to let that continue to still be the Z-Wave antenna, but control it through Home Assistant?
Yes. So in Home Assistant, there's a integration or an add-on for Habitat.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, you locked up. 1 second. Hold on. We'll see if we get you back. See if we you're back.
All right.
Yeah, you're back.
So no, there's an add-on in Home Assistant for Habitat, and in Habitat there's an app you can add, and it will sync them. So you'll get all your Habitat.
Oh, maybe we're flooding your network right now, Gavin. Give him a second to come back here. Are you back yet?
Kind of, yes.
What do you think's going on?
I don't know. It must be my home network.
But yeah, we're flooding your network with.
I said too many commands at once.
We'll give it it's okay. It's okay. We'll give it a second. So there's an integration between Home Assistant and Habitat. Now, if I sync those two together, is that going to duplicate things? Like if I've got stuff already set up on Home Assistant, will that duplicate the stuff that's on Habitat too?
No, you can choose what you want to export and import. So what I did was when I first did my migration, I didn't have a Zigbee or Z-Wave dongle, so I used my Habitat as the antenna, and all the devices were exported to my Home Assistant.
Okay.
So
it's using the Habitat Z-Wave.
Yeah.
Like, dude, this is like a revelation to me because I don't have anything Z-Wave. What would I if I was going to have Z-Wave or Zigbee, what would I have that uses that?
In terms of like devices?
Yeah. What kind of devices?
Well, for one, my Z-Wave, all my switches are Innovelli switches and they're on Z-Wave. Okay. Right? So I've pretty much like every switch in the house, and that's mainly because of my ADD. They all have to look the same. So I have them all as Innovelli's reds, and they do some cool things I have them doing. And then all my sensors I recently migrated over to Zeus, so they're all Z-Wave as well. Right? But I do have some Zigbee sensors, some Aquara devices, also. So it all depends on the brand. Like I always like to settle on one brand of a certain device and then get to know them inside out, all the quirks, so that when things go wrong, I know how to troubleshoot it, and it's easier than having 10 different brands.
if I'm using TP-Link, I use a lot of that, or Casa.
Yep.
Those are Wi-Fi enabled, but those aren't Z-Wave, right?
No,
That's
that's
whatever.
Wi-Fi.
That's
Yep.
Wi-Fi. Okay.
So
All
they'll
right.
discover you can add those to Home Assistant without any antenna.
Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, all
Yep.
that stuff. I
Yeah.
use that's what's worked well for me is those. I think the Philips Hue is Wi-Fi, right? As well. It's not a Zigbee or a Z-Wave. I always wondered, like, because I'd search for those, I never find them because I don't have any of those. I must not use any of those devices that have that protocol.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
you'd have to know, you would know when you got a Zigbee device,
Okay.
and I like to use all of them, right? So,
Yeah.
I like to build them up so that I have strong meshes in both ecosystems, because sometimes there's a Zigbee device that I can't get a version of, or vice versa. So I like to use both of them. I don't limit myself.
We Brian thinks the water company now is hacking your Wi-Fi to slow you down a little bit.
They heard what I'm doing.
Oh, you shouldn't have said anything.
Oh boy.
The water police will be out tomorrow. You know, they'll be
Oh
like,
boy.
you no, good stuff." Well, every time we have this conversation, I always go back, like you got me last time we talked, or maybe it was 2 times ago, to go back and look at Habitat. Because I was
Yes.
like, huh, okay, I've got that device, and I think I have a C5 too. That'd be an older device, right? From them.
Yes, so it would be a great experience. I really like the C5 box.
Okay.
So if you're gonna, you will have a great experience with that one.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite ones.
Well, it's sitting there, but I didn't
Yeah.
realize I've moved to Home Assistant. I didn't realize you could connect the two together.
Use it for the
Okay,
antennas.
I got some. No, totally. Yeah, no. All of a sudden, it makes sense to keep that thing around, right, for its antennas. Okay, 2 things. One is that I'm going to work on that integration to see if I can get that working. 2 is get the app installed. Like I think I've been missing out on the app.
Yep.
On the app bit of it. Would it make any sense to have the app on like an Android? I have an Android tablet that I use for some additional home automation dashboard stuff. Would it make sense to have the app installed on something like that as well for its, I don't know, any advantage to having it installed on other devices, or does it just confuse it?
It may just confuse it. If it's working, if the web is working for you, the app may be a little more responsive, though. I don't know. It depends on the age of the device. So
Okay.
maybe the app may be a little nicer, display a little nicer, easy to work with.
Yeah. Will the app work when I'm away from the house, or is that going to be tied? Do I have to have that enabled in some way where my Home Assistant is viewable on front to the outside?
So you have a couple options here. Some people go the free route where you can expose your router, your ports through your own reverse proxy and have it connect that way. I just thought that was too much work for what I really wanted, so I pay for the Nabucasa. They have their own reverse proxy, and that just makes life so much easier. It's what, $5 a month or something like that and I get to support Home Assistant at the same time. So if I'm using their product, I'm happy to support them, and they're making my life so much easier. It's not that expensive.
Yeah, no, it's good thing to think about. I haven't had the need to control things outside of the house yet, but
Yeah.
maybe that situation is coming up. Gavin, let me ask you one more question before we wrap it up. Of course, we've spent some time with Christian a couple weeks ago talking about LastPass.
Yep.
And that beer is starting to kick in for sure. Like my speech is slowly just going to start drifting off here.
That was 15 minutes ago.
No.
You're only now realizing.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right. Did this affect you at all, the LastPass? And are you doing something different, or what do you think about this password manager stuff?
That was a great podcast. I have to say, that was an awesome podcast. I learned so much, and I came out of that podcast fearing so much more. He really opened my eyes to a lot of things. Now, I'm a RoboForm user, and I've been with them for many years, and I even have RoboForm set up for my family, because me and my sister would manage my mom's password, so we have sharing and stuff going on. And if we didn't have a complicated setup like that, I probably would migrate off of it. but I have probably 600 passwords in mine.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I did not want to go and migrate, but it's always in the back of my mind that if I ever, have the opportunity to migrate off of it, we even have things like if something were to happen to me, my sister can request access to my account and get to the password to make her life, easier to sort things out, things like that we all thought of. So he opened my eyes. I'm still a RoboForm. I'm glad I wasn't a LastPass user though, and sometimes I I find OnePass and LastPass were very popular. And sometimes I stay away from the more popular things because the more popular you are, the more they'll try and hack it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So, RoboForm is not as popular, but they've also been very good to me. So I pay for them.
Yeah. Good. No, it's a good story. I mean, it makes sense from that standpoint, right? I mean, it makes sense. I had 380 passwords, so not quite as many. Probably 100 of those though were old accounts that things I tried years ago. LastPass just collected them, and then but you still got to go through. One of the things I've been thinking about is when I do check them, because I've been checking every single site. One, does it still work? Can I get signed in? Right. And then if I'm not using it, can I close it? Can I close the account? Right. And just to make sure that it's something I can do. I don't need to leave dead sites out there. I don't need to leave dead accounts out there. They just don't need to be
back.
Yeah, you're back. They just don't need to be. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Are you hearing me now? Yeah. Okay.
My internet's was so perfect all day.
Yeah.
It was just so much work. And then as soon as we started talking about the water meters, it
starts going, you're fine. You're fine. But it's been a good exercise in cleanup just to go through them, kind of making sure I've been giving all my sites, I went through all the financial sites first. Gave them as long of those passwords as I possibly can, changing every single one, making sure they're all unique.
That
it
was amazing how many accounts I didn't log into anymore, or even
right. Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to let you go here in a minute.
This is getting, I don't know what is going on tonight. It's just,
well, here's the good news. We got through 99% of the content.
Awesome.
And all as well. Yeah. Well, I think it's been a good experience to go back through and see, like you were saying, you just don't know how many sites are dead. And it's okay. They're dead. They've been closed down. They weren't going to be able to log in, even if they had your stuff. I just want to make sure, one, if I'm not using it, I close it out. Like if I can, if they won't let me close it out, or if they don't have a way of doing that, I just change it to an infinitely long password and kind of leave it. I keep it so I know that I've got it. But
it's amazing how many sites don't let you close it out. I get a lot of people signing up for sites under my name, right? For some reason. And I would actually go to that site. I log in, I change the password because it's coming to me.
Right.
And then I try and close the account. And it's amazing how many don't even have that feature. So I do some random long password and just leave and
let it be. Let it be. Yeah. They're never going to change it again.
Exactly. And then I start getting change requests in my email as they're trying. I'm like, you should never have used my email, right?
No. And that happens to me too from time to time. And it's the weirdest thing. You're like, well, why would you use a different? Are you just putting in random email addresses?
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. Well, Gavin, I tell you what, I will close things up. Your internet is iffy enough. We'll let you get back to monitoring your call as well as beyond. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Thanks for having me. I apologize for the internet. It's just I don't know what's going on tonight. But
it happens. It happens. Don't apologize. We all have those moments like that. Listen, I appreciate your perspective. It's a second look, not even that. It's a hard look at Home Assistant for me, and like, okay, maybe there's some things I could do tonight that would, or tomorrow, that would add value to what I'm doing from Home Assistant. So thanks for challenging me on that. I appreciate it.
Hey, if you have any questions, you can get us. I monitor the Discord channel. So, just,
and you're just Gavin Campbell out there at Gavin Campbell on Discord. Where do they find the podcast? Where would they go if they want to listen to that?
HomeTech.fm is the podcast, and I'm on Twitter. I'm still on Twitter, Gavin Campbell. But we also have HomeTech.social, our own Mastodon instance.
Okay.
So
How's
if you're
that
looking
working
for
out?
Mastodon, it's amazing how many people are actually joining. Like I don't know. There was a period when we had open signups, and the
Right.
bots just were killing us. Like we were just
Oh,
getting
I bet.
bots joining. So then we had to lock it off, and now people are just joining. They give their reasons, what they're interested in, and it's amazing. Like I'm sitting here constantly having to approve people because it's just coming, it's
Yeah.
flowing in nicely. So it's been nice over there.
Are they staying? Like,
A lot of people are browsing.
yeah. Okay.
I find there's some
Yeah.
people that are very active,
Yeah.
and I find those people you can get some great activity with, like there's people looking for a conversation over there, and they get involved in some of the
Yeah.
things you're talking about. And it's good conversations. I haven't seen anybody arguing or, any random other things that you see coming from Twitter. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
enjoying it. It's been a lot more techy over there.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've enjoyed Discord. I mean, Discord's worked great for us, and
Yeah.
that's been a great platform to just enough conversation going on over there at theaverageguy.tv/Discord. If you want to join us, a few did last week, and if you want to join us on that side. So, well, good. Well, keep charging on. I would encourage folks, just like I do with everybody else, if you're listening to this podcast, you'd probably like hometech.fm. So if you want to head over there, check that out, get subscribed, find it on the on your favorite podcast app or whatever, get subscribed to it, listen to it a couple times, and I bet you'll like it. I mean, you'll get to hear the story that we opened with about the school who couldn't turn their lights off.
Yeah.
And you guys, I think you have like a news segment, and then you kind of dig deep on some things, right? Is that kind of the format?
Yeah. And we also are very open with what projects we're working on or just random thoughts. Sometimes, me, TJ, and Seth, sometimes, some people, we have some good times and people get some good laughs out of it and enjoy it. So it's a good, fun podcast.
Yeah, no, good stuff. I'll let you go. We won't test your internet anymore, but thanks for coming out, Gavin. Always appreciate it. And we'll look forward to having you back again.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim.
All right, man. Have a good evening.
Right,
Take care. Yeah, you bet. A couple reminders on the way out. I mentioned the Discord group. Head out to theaverageguy.tv/Discord if you want to join us for a good conversation. Just a great way to stay up to date with a lot of the folks that listen are out there. A great way to do it. Leave us a message if you want me to cover something. A little light. Let me move up a little bit. Leave us a message at homegadgetgeeks.com. There's a little microphone there that you could leave a message. Just send me an email, Jim@theaverageguy.tv. If you've left a message, I don't always get the notification for that. Theaverageguy.tv platform, both web and media hosting. Yeah, that beer was. Woo. Powered by Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. For more information, visit maplegrovepartners.com. John, thanks for that beer. Of course, HelloFresh, if you haven't tried that out yet, they have really upped the savings. Save as much as $110 on your first 5 boxes. It used to be kind of $40 off the first box or something like that. Now it's $40 off the first box plus some. So if you haven't tried it, now might be the right time to do it. theaverageguy.tv/HelloFresh. It's a good thing we're at the end of the show. Of course, you can contact the show, Jim@theaverageguy.tv, if you want some conversation. Neil, I always love hearing from you. Neil sends me an email just about every week. Appreciate that. And thanks for sending that out. And of course, subscribe, rate, review, all that other good stuff, regards to the platform you're on. Thanks for coming out tonight. Brian says he always enjoys the Home Tech podcast, so that's good. Thanks, Gavin, for coming out. I appreciate it as well. We are live every Thursday, just about every Thursday. Actually, next Thursday, no show. I have a work conflict. We one time a year we do a week of podcasts that we invite all our customers to, and that's next week for me. So no show next week. Randy Walker is coming back on the 23rd. I have an open date on the 2nd that I'll be filling. And then Micah's coming on, Micah Librant, who, I worked with her for a lot of years at Gallup. We're going to talk about some kitchen gadgets. Uyghur is back on the 16th. Mark Robson on the 23rd. We're going to talk about getting ready for summer barbecue season. And we'll have some things to talk about. And then the last Thursday of March, Aaron Lawrence is back. And she even said yes after I kind of made her think twice about the way I drink coffee. So I was pretty excited that she said yes to that. We'll be back again, taking a week off. Randy's coming. I got to get some things booked. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the live show. And it gives you a week to catch up if you're behind. So thanks for listening. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.